To Americans for Limited Government live stream. I'm happy to be here today, joined by Jonathan Emord. Jonathan Emord is a distinguished attorney, a constitutional scholar. His law offices are here in Washington, D.C. And one of the things that really makes him a standout and an expert in the area of constitutional law is he is the only American attorney ever to have defeated the FDA 8 times in federal court. So he has gone up against the administrative state and he has won. He's out with a new book that we will talk about in a little bit. It's called The Authoritarians, and you're going to love this. This is a book that goes into the history of how we got to be where we are today with this massive leap towards socialism, and some of us are even calling it communism. But how did we move from limited government into socialism? So Jonathan and I will talk about that because he's written a book about it. But the first thing that caught my attention about Jonathan was about a week ago, he had a very, very timely piece in Town Hall, which he'll talk about. His piece was about the legal quagmire he is predicting Joe Biden will find himself in as a result of his vaccine mandate. So welcome, Jonathan. I'm grateful to have you here today. And why don't you just tell us about this legal quagmire that you think Joe Biden will be in?
Well, I suspect as soon as the standard is issued by the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, meaning the very minute it is issued, there will be numerous cases filed in federal court against the administration, and they'll arise from individual employees, from employers, and from states, and they will be numerous. So I suspect that there may well be dozens, if not hundreds, of suits filed against the administration because of its COVID-19 vaccination mandate. And it will be subjected to quite a thorough going. And I suspect the result of that will be that his policy will end up being largely Swiss cheese, and that it'll have many holes through which people can go to avoid complying with his mandate.
Okay, thank you. So you were saying that there are several grounds in your article on which this mandate can be challenged. Let me go pull up that screen and I'll look at some of the specific cases that you're saying. The equal protection component of the Fifth Amendment. You say that federal and non-federal employees who have natural immunity from prior infection may well sue under the equal protection component of the Fifth Amendment, arguing there is no rational basis for them to be coerced into vaccination or weekly testing. So why are these things seem quite obvious, even to a non-expert like myself? How is it that Biden is jumping into this?
It's idiotic. The people who have natural immunity have some 13 or more times the level of immunity as those who are vaccinated. So compelling them, that is the naturally immune, to be vaccinated is ridiculous. And furthermore, upwards of 100 million Americans have natural immunity. Some 60 to 65% of Americans have had both shots, jabs, and as a result, the overall effect is a very high level of immunity that's operating in the country. Those who are getting infected include breakthrough infections from those who were vaccinated early, as well as those who have not had any vaccine. But it seems to me that this was predictably going to level off, and it is, and it's dropping. So the irony is that he's imposing this mandate precisely at the time when it appears that the contagion is diminishing from the Delta variant rather than otherwise. And furthermore, there's no certain evidence of the Delta variant because they don't have specific testing identifying the Delta variant. So we don't really know the extent to which the Delta variant is responsible. But the bottom line is that people will either get the infection, or they will be vaccinated and get it later, or whatever, but sooner or later, everybody is going to get this. And the good news is that over time, it's likely to diminish in its virulence, such that the more people will survive. Seems to me it's a boneheaded move designed to draw attention away from his Afghanistan debacle. And it's also boneheaded because you would do wise to invest in therapeutics. The vaccine is increasingly a therapeutic because it's not very effective. After 4.5 months, it appears to wane. And that's what the Israeli study information suggests, and the wide breakthrough infections in Israel, despite the mass vaccination of the population. So it doesn't make much sense. And then it runs into numerous legal problems, constitutional and statutory. And it doesn't even meet the standard under the OSHA rules. The OSHA rules that he's citing, that he would rely on, allow for an emergency exception to the rulemaking process for a period of 6 months. And the way that works is an order is issued, but it can only be issued under Section 6C of the OSHA Act if 2 requirements are met. The first requirement is that he has to show that employees are exposed to a grave danger. The problem that he has is that it's very difficult to argue that all employees, the 100 million that are affected by this, are in fact exposed to a grave danger, because many are working from home and many work outside and many have natural immunity. So none of those would be would expose others to a grave danger, right? Because simply isn't happening when you're working from home or when you're working from outside, where the risk of transmission is extremely low, or you have natural immunity. And the people with natural immunity not only have extraordinarily high levels of immunity, but they also do not transmit the virus. So they don't pose a threat to anybody. So a large number can then argue under this standard that they do not pose a grave danger to other employees. And the second part of the test is that the action taken, that is this broad-based mandate that you either be vaccinated or tested if you're in a company of 100 employees or more, that mandate is not necessary to protect employees from the grave danger. And the reason is that only a small fraction of them would fall into the grave danger category. And furthermore, on a case-by-case basis, even those people would, as I will explain in a minute, would likely fall under one or more legal grounds for exemption. So it doesn't. It's more of a political move to pivot against his horrible Afghanistan crisis, which is going to live on for him and probably make it certain that he will not be reelected. The problem with the Afghanistan thing, of course, is that we have Americans left there, we have SIVs left there, we have Afghan allies left there, and we're relying on the quote unquote graces of the human jackals, the Taliban, to ferry them out safely. That will only go on so long before the Taliban realize that they can take advantage of the situation. They're already killing Americans. They're already killing SIVs, and they are torturing a number of people. So I don't, that's what he's trying to get away from by doing this. Over 60% of Democrats favor mandatory vaccination, and so he's trying to appeal to his base, but he's done it in an extraordinarily stupid way. And he did it, and not only that, you can see the lack of sincerity here, because a number of things point to that. First, he's insulting those who he says must follow his command to be vaccinated. He's categorizing the unvaccinated as evil, as stupid, as people who are less worthy of any help, and he's inviting discrimination against them. He's condescending in his communication about them. So that is certainly, you don't slap someone in the face right before you ask them to do you a favor. So he's not serious about that. And the second aspect of it is he's not serious because he's exempted the entire United States Post Office because of the postal union from the mandate. So postal workers who go to people's homes every day with the mail are exempt from this mandate. And then in addition, he's not applying it to illegal aliens. And of course, we have over 600,000 illegal aliens entering this country, who've entered this country, excuse me, who many of whom have had COVID and are spreading it in our country, across the country, because he's transporting these illegal aliens all over the United States, particularly to battleground states. And then he has Congress and its staff exempt, and he has the White House and its staff and the courts and their staffs exempt. So he's a cynic. He's not really serious. And the upshot of this is that he's inviting more and more and more legal problems. Under the Americans with Disabilities Act, those who are immune compromised or otherwise have other permanent terminal type illnesses for which vaccination is not advised by their physicians have a reasonable basis for seeking a medical exemption. Those who have a religious scruple against it cannot be compelled under the Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, because employers are not allowed to discriminate against people based on their religious scruples in the workplace. So there's a lot here that is going to be worked out in the courts, and I think he's going to end up with far fewer than 100 million people will be required to be vaccinated under this thing.
Well, I really appreciate your pointing out the obvious here, that the legal grounds for Biden to do this are indeed very weak. You really go through that closely in your town hall article. And then you provide the analysis that basically this was less of a sort of a legal move and more of a political move, as you said, to move away from the Afghanistan story, which was such a disaster for the country and just a terrible tragedy. So he was able to try to get the media off of Afghanistan by looking at these mandates. Because the fact is these mandates aren't going to hold up. There's going to, as you say, they're going to be stuck in legal quagmire for who knows how long. And then you did mention something, Jonathan, that I want to pivot to here. You said that 60% of Democrats favor these vaccine mandates and that Joe Biden is trying to play to his base. And in your new book, let me just show a screen of that so people can see what this new book is. It's called The Authoritarians. It's Defend Liberty, Defeat Socialism. I love your book. I just got a chance to look at it briefly last night and this morning to prepare for the interview. But that's what Americans for Limited Government is all about. We could share that same logo, Defend Liberty, Defeat Socialism. It's so concise. But in your book, you write, Jonathan, that the Democratic Party is dominated by authoritarians. And I see that this impulse, these mandates for these vaccines are an example of authoritarianism that we're seeing coming from the Democrat Party. Do you want to talk a little bit about why that is?
Yeah, it's a fascinating story. Authoritarianism reared its ugly head in America in the 1830s, in the antebellum South, when slave owners confronted a conundrum. First of all, their forebears had fought in the American Revolution. They revered Thomas Jefferson, who was a Southerner from Virginia, and they wanted to ensure, that their children understood the meaning of the American Revolution. But they had this problem because they were deriving economic benefits from the existence of slavery, and they had come to like it, and they didn't want to lose it. And more importantly, on the social front, they were deeply offended by abolitionist attacks against them, because the abolitionists said that this was anti-Christian to enslave people, and that furthermore it violated the second paragraph of the Declaration of Independence, our national commitment to ensure that all men are created equal, and that all men, all of mankind, humanity, is endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So they were denying, according to the abolitionists, they were denying a huge number of people those rights. And so what happened was they had to pivot, much like Joe Biden is doing now. They had to pivot away from defense of the founding documents, the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence in particular, Jefferson in person, and had to adopt a new philosophy. Well, they found one in Friedrich Hegel. Hegel was the teacher of Karl Marx. He was the founder of collectivism, the notion that government ought to not protect individual rights, but instead ought to define for the people what avenues of pursuit or pursuits were legitimate. And then it was the duty of the people to follow the government's lead, to follow planned economies, to follow an administrative state, to adhere to what experts in government decreed to be in the public interest or for the common good. All right, so they did this. They adopted Hegel, and Hegel defended slavery. He described slavery as socialism that was beneficial. He said that it would care for an inferior race by enabling them to associate with a superior race, and would enable that superior race to care for the inferior race from cradle to grave, even though it might be under arduous circumstances. But he said that those circumstances were befitting a defeated slave population. And so the Southerners adopted it. They adopted this idea that there weren't individual rights. They attacked Thomas Jefferson and said that he was a person who had written something that was nonsensical, and that was to be rejected in its entirety. So the idea that all men are created equal, they rejected. They adopted Hegel's conception of rights. And this then, we would have hoped, would have been extinguished by the 13th Amendment, but it was not. Instead, many leaders in the progressive movement, beginning right after the Civil War in the 1860s, began to articulate the same Hegelian collectivism as a justification for the creation of the administrative state. What happened was, as I explained in detail in the book, legions of American academics at the best universities went to Germany to study in Bonn and Heidelberg and elsewhere in Germany, what were called the historic schools. And in these schools, they were taught Hegelian socialism. They were taught to reject the idea of the founding documents, the founding principles of this country, reject Lockean concepts of individual rights and Republican forms of government, and instead to accept collectivism as the appropriate means by which to rule, because that was said to be in the best interests of people, because it was divined by experts, and to advocate the creation of the administrative state. They then came back from Germany, indoctrinated with socialism, and took over all of the major academic institutions, other institutions in society, created numerous societies, and dominated them, and then pushed out of existence from the university and from colleges across the country the classical education that had theretofore been the norm, and instead substituted for it socialism. So they taught generations of academics and students to hate the American Constitution, to hate the Declaration of Independence, the principles articulated there, which define what it means to be an American, and to cleave to socialism. This then leads to an interesting set of developments. So then you have the start in the 1880s of the development of the administrative state on the federal level, already been well established on the state level by that time. And we see a direct and intended, by their writings, circumvention of the Constitution's limits on power, intentionally undertaken because they did not respect the Constitution, they did not respect individual rights, and they wanted to increase the power of governing authorities and limit judicial challenges and eliminate any barriers to imposition of their will on the population. And so these agencies were established with combined legislative, executive, and judicial powers, what James Madison defined as the very definition of tyranny. And they were unelected, these heads of these agencies, and they ruled with efficiency without any checks and balances on their actions. And they ruled for political purposes, and they eliminated all of the Article 3 judicial protections that occur in Article 3 courts in their administrative courts. And they used things called administrative warrants, which revived what the Founding Fathers destroyed in the Fourth Amendment, which was the general warrant. That is, an issuance of a warrant without any procedural safeguards from an independent judge that would allow you to demand almost anything, indeed almost virtually everything that a person had, or information they possessed, or individuals with whom they communicated, contacted, or did business. And this is now the norm. And so the administrative state also had a number of other things that violated the rights of people. There's no trial by jury in an administrative court. There is no right against self-incrimination. You are accused, and you are presumed to be guilty of the accused charges until you prove yourself innocent. You are not allowed any discovery against those who are accusing you. You're not even allowed to know who your accuser is. You're not given the benefit of stable charges. The charges brought against you can mutate at the government's will without any notice to you, and the ultimate decision of the administrative tribunal can be against you on grounds that you didn't even know were the grounds that were brought against you. You have no effective right of appeal. The courts have determined that they will defer to the administrative agency's findings of fact and conclusions of law. So it's extraordinarily difficult to get an agency decision reviewed. There's no de novo review. That is, there's no novel or new review of all the facts and law by a court. The administrative agency judges, if they dare decide in your favor, are almost universally reversed by those who bring the charges, which are the heads of the agencies. The agency heads bring the charges, so they're the prosecutor, and they also serve as the ultimate judge. So you have a combination of the prosecutor and the judge in the administrative state, which utterly denies you any hope for a fair adjudication. So as you see, this is quite draconian, quite authoritarian, quite abusive, and yet the authoritarian state, the administrative state that exists on the federal level, makes 9/10 of all the laws that govern us. We are not governed by those we elect. Principally, we are governed by the administrative state, because almost all laws that affect us come not from those we elect, but rather from the unelected heads of these agencies, who are largely unaccountable to the courts and the Congress and the American people. So this story is explained in detail in the Authoritarians, and I identify specific actors who I think many people would be shocked to know were responsible for bringing socialism to America. For example, Teddy Roosevelt, who many people think was a good Republican these days, will be perhaps surprised to learn that he actually very fondly viewed communism, in the sense that he outflanked the Democrat Party, which was a progressive party, when he ran for his second term as president unsuccessfully. And he adopted wittingly the socialist platform of Eugene Debs, who was running, because he wanted to draw in all the socialists from the Socialist Party, in addition to disaffected Democrats who wanted to follow his Bull Moose Party, in order to defeat his Republican opponent. He was formerly a Republican. And so you see, Teddy Roosevelt wasn't much of a limited government advocate. And then you find, of course, people that you would readily recognize as not ones, but you might not know this, that Woodrow Wilson was not only a Democrat, not only in favor of government power in specific instances, he actually despised the Declaration of Independence, wrote about that. He was a very fond advocate of Hegel. He is a classic progressive in that respect. He believed in collectivism. He didn't believe in individual rights. And he also wrote of the Declaration that if the first paragraphs of the Declaration were eliminated, that's basically what the Declaration is about. It's simply a historical document. In other words, if the principles that are articulated that define what it means to be an American in the Declaration of Independence are eliminated, he would be comfortable with the Declaration, but wasn't comfortable with it as it was written. And there's much more to be said about Woodrow Wilson and his real hatred for America, which is quite disturbing to learn. And then we have Franklin Delano Roosevelt, of course, and we all know that he vastly expanded the administrative state. But what you might not know about Franklin Roosevelt was that he was a big fan of Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini in the beginning, before the war. He greatly admired fascism. He thought that the corporate estate in Italy was ideal. He sent many members of his administration over to Rome to meet with Mussolini to study it. And he had sort of a loving pen pal relationship with Benito Mussolini, sharing back and forth information. He sent Rexford Guy Tugwell, his assistant secretary of agriculture, over there. And Tugwell, who was a communist in heart, he loved planned economies, absolutely adored Stalin, and thought that ought to be the model followed to get us out of the Great Depression. But there's much more to be said there too. One thing that is also remarkable, I explain this in the book, is that Felix Frankfurter, who was a justice of the Supreme Court, was actually a socialist. And this is not, people ought to recognize this is not an argument. This is simply a recitation of the facts underlying his history. Felix Frankfurter came to the United States from Vienna, lived in the Bronx, and he from the time he was a very small child forward, he seemed to despise commercialism and big business. But when he came to our country, he had the benefit of going to free lectures in New York City, and those free lectures that he liked the most were the ones where labor leaders were advocating socialism and where academics would advocate socialism. He then became a member of the Fabian Society, which was the precursor to the British Labour Party, which was a socialist party. And the Fabian Society was overtly socialist, and he was a member of that. He then helped found and promote the International Socialist Society at Harvard, was its faculty member at that time. As a young boy, well, as a law student, he went to the Progressive Party Convention in 1924, and he there advocated socialism overtly, and the party platform in 1924 would even make Bernie Sanders blush. It was so far to the left, it advocated government takeover of virtually every private enterprise in the country. So he was quite dedicated in that regard. Now, when he became a member of the administration of Roosevelt, he was an advisor. He continued to serve as a professor. He populated the New Deal agencies with people who were so far left that many of them became communist agents, created cells in different departments, and communicated information that was classified to the Soviets during the Roosevelt administration. This is well explained in the book, and it's not really remarkably new in the sense that it's been published previously, but I've gathered it all here so that you can see just how extensive communism and authoritarianism became embedded into the American government at that time. So then, carrying it all the way to the present, BLM and Antifa are, of course, communist organizations. They are dominated by people who advocate a communist overthrow of the United States government, and they believe a violent overthrow is the way it will happen. And so they arm their members with riot advocacy, and then they turn them loose in the cities of the United States to burn buildings down, destroy private property, steal private property, basically attack the police, kill innocent people. They're at war with us. They are communists in our own country, waging war against us in the cities of this nation. Antifa and the BLM organization, massively supported with funding coming from many of the largest companies in this country, which have sold themselves out. And then you ask yourself, well, how is it that they can get away with this rampant violence across the United States, suffering no consequence? And the answer is that the government is filled with those who sympathize with them. And the reason why there is no action against them is that they don't want this to stop. Many in government don't want it to stop. And it's quite remarkable that the defunding of the police, of course, is simply a way to get the police out of the way so that Antifa and BLM can commit more acts of destruction, murder, and looting and arson. The whole effort to redefine what constitutes policing and make it basically social work is, again, an effort to eliminate protection for private property and for individual life, so that these radical and violent elements can gain greater ground and increase their movement to topple governments and destroy the United States. Well, so let's not mince words about it. That's what it is.
No, I think that what you're saying is fabulous. I love how you laid out that long history, that this impulse towards authoritarianism isn't necessarily new. It's been a part of our country for many years. And I was saddened to see Teddy Roosevelt associated with authoritarianism because, like you said, he has been a hero for many of us on the conservative right. But I still love him. I'm going to give him a pass, or perhaps. But before we go, two things I want to ask you. What is the easiest way for people to get your book? I think I have a screenshot up of the Amazon site. Is there an easier place to go, or where do you recommend?
Amazon might be the easiest. It's also available through Target.com, Walmart.com, BarnesandNoble.com, and there are others too. But I think that one thing that the book does, which was my goal, I was driven to do this because I was just so appalled at how many people thought that socialism and communism was, just happened overnight in America. And it's simply not the case. Unfortunately for us, we've had it with us for a very long time. But I'll tell you, to defeat it, you need to understand that history. You need to understand where they are, how they're functioning, who they are, and then what to do about them. And that's also addressed in the book, how we bring back a constitution that has limited powers that mean it. This constitution in exile, as it was mentioned, as it was referred to wisely by Judge Ginsburg of the DC Circuit, we need to take it out of exile and make it predominant in America again. It is the linchpin for defense of individual liberty. We cannot be free for long if our Constitution remains in exile. We have to have protection for our rights, or these really horrendous individuals, evil individuals, will not only educate you through critical race theory to hate their country, hate themselves, and hate each other, but will also tear down our institutions and increasingly make it impossible for us to be protected against violence through legal means. We will increasingly be forced to rely on our Second Amendment rights to defend ourselves against these attacks when these people show up in our homes and our property and our businesses. So we have to reverse that trend. Otherwise, the rule of law will become meaningless. And as it does, it will be a nation of tyranny. And these people want that. They want to be the tyrants. We have to stop them.
I've got a copy of your book here. Like I said, I just was able to flip through a few things and take some notes on it, but I'm going to delve into it. And what I'm really excited is to get to the end, where I know you have a chapter sort of giving us very practical tips on what we can do. The way back to liberty and prosperity is your last chapter. And that's what I want to get to. And I think our readers will want to know as well, because so many of us agree with you, and we are frustrated, we're angry, and we want to know, what can we do? So get a copy of The Authoritarians. It's at Amazon, Walmart, Target, Barnes and Noble, all of those online or in the stores. And I think you're going to like it. And we'll all read together the final chapter, where it'll give us some useful tips and some hope that we can turn things around. So I appreciate you joining us, Jonathan. I know that our supporters here at Americans for Limited Government are thrilled to hear someone like you, who is very learned and knowledgeable and scholarly in understanding the problems that America faces and giving us solutions. So thank you. I really appreciate it. Anything you want to say?
Well, thank you, Catherine, for the opportunity to appear today. And I appreciate your kind words. And hopefully, I know probably everyone who's watching this loves this country. And I can't tell you how critical it is for us to become a vocal majority rather than a silent one. The silent majority has to become vocal, or we're going to lose this country. It's a radical minority that is trying to destroy this nation, and they are intent with a zeal that is unimaginably strong. And if we don't stand up and fight them and do it with every ounce of strength that we have, we sadly are going to watch our nation, freedom on the planet, disappear and follow into an abyss that is so common. That is the wretched history of socialism wherever it has taken root. Margaret Thatcher well said that the problem with socialism is that you eventually run out of other people's money. And when you do run out of other people's money, when capital flees because government is taking it all and not allowing people to harvest the fruits of their own labor, then you will witness a degree of misery and poverty and abuse. And that's when you come to the stark realization that you are a slave to the state. The irony is when they use race as a means to create a new Marxism, oppressed and oppressors defined by their color, that Marxism leads inevitably to slavery. Marxism is a defense of the institution of slavery as it was in the 1830s. It remains so today. They just want to dictate how you run your life. And so, we want our founding principles in the second paragraph of the Declaration to remain our defining characteristics. We are the envy of the world because of them, and we have been for over 200 years, 300 years. We ought not allow these people to ruin the greatest nation on earth. It's a privilege to be an American, and it's a great opportunity for everyone to realize at this moment, particularly, that we are near losing our liberties, and we once lost, as Ronald Reagan explained, they're lost forever. We will be telling our children of what it was once like to be free, as Reagan said.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And with those final words, we will close this out. And thank you all for joining us. And we'll see you next time on an ALG live stream. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.